Good morning, Mark and Jared and Matt. I'm on my early morning walk. I get up in the morning and enjoy the sunrise with my two crazy dogs. And anyway, I was thinking yesterday while I was out here about me bringing up to you that I would be happy to kind of orient you to trauma work and give you a sense of how do we help people with their well-being, especially when they've been in situations where there's been a lot of intensity and focus on intensity through work. But also, we come into our professions already wired in our biology to kind of have a homeostasis in the biology. And I certainly find that a lot of first responders are, wired to really be used to intensity. Not everybody, but a lot of people have chosen this profession and come into it because they've had high intense jobs before, like the military, or they've grown up in family systems where there was a lot of intensity, maybe intense in that, they had dysfunctional family systems that they had to navigate, maybe parents who dysregulated easily and they had to find a way to feel stable in the midst of that, might be one example. And so anyway, always remember that people aren't just showing up now with symptom or not feeling well, that things are all based on the foundation of people's biology and the patterns that are in their biology. And so some people are more resilient to experiences that are distressing, and other people may not be so much. So, okay, so trauma work. Real quick, Dan Siegel has a wonderful sculpt of the brain. If I had both hands, I'd give you both hands right now. But if you think about my wrist and my arm being my brainstem and spinal cord, this finger here, kind of wrapped into the brain, is the midbrain. We call it the primitive brain, the limbic brain. There are some structures in there, the hippocampus and amygdala in particular, that store memory, and it's where our self-protection comes out of. And there is surveillance constantly online, looking out into the world and inside the body to register threat cues and safety cues and help us take some sort of action, mobilize if we sense that there might be any danger. And so this is all happening off stage out of conscious awareness, and is always happening here in the middle part of the brain. And then when I roll my fingers over, this represents the higher reasoning centers of the brain. This is the frontal cortex behind my eyes, where my logical thought is. If I say, tell me about the procedure for this or that, that's coming out of here. Or to organize yourself to go clean a bedroom it's fully messy, takes this part of the brain to be able to plan and prepare and to come up with a logical sequence, for example. This part is very new in our evolution, whereas brainstem in this part is extremely primitive, because we are primarily wired to be able to adapt and survive. So when we talk about trauma, we are talking about that the biology has patterned to be very sensitive to threat cues and to be very hypervigilant. So in the autonomic nervous system, we have 3 primary states we can be in that we don't consciously choose. Fight, flight, freeze. And then the third one, we call the ventral vagus system. And that is a bundle of cranial nerves and the vagus nerve that when they're turned on, this is our rest, digest, this is our capacity to socially relate. When that system is on, we have capacity for compassion and empathy. We can read people's facial expression, and we give off facial expression. We don't just have that flat, still face. Lots of good things happen. So we want to think about our ventral vagus state as our home base in the nervous system. And that the body drops down when we register some threat into what we call sympathetic state. That is our fight or flight state in the body, where we are mobilizing because the midbrain has sent some sort of threat cue, and we're going to mobilize to take some sort of action. But if we can't take effective action against the threat to diminish it or to bring in more safety in some way, the body will drop into the dorsal vagus system. And I can show you diagrams of this stuff to give you some visual. But the dorsal vagus system is a wired-in biology that when we cannot escape danger or threat, we begin to immobilize and shut down. And it's what, like in your training, you're going to rehearse and rehearse and rehearse and rehearse procedure and ways to maybe draw your firearm and that sort of thing, so that when you go into sympathetic arousal on the job, you don't go into freeze. You can access muscle memory because it's been trained and trained and trained in. So that is rehearsal you do so that you don't go freezing. But I also want you to think about freeze in a positive way, that if you think about our systems as constantly taking in data, we actually only register a very small part of the millions of pieces of data entering the system at any one time, right? Like right now, I've got my feet and I can hear my feet crunching on the earth. I'm watching my dogs ahead of me. I'm aware that the sun is up and how beautiful the clouds are. I'm also aware I haven't had breakfast yet and I'm a little hungry. So at any given time, there's so much data entering the system, but we only have capacity to be aware and conscious of certain. That was weird. So where was I? That disrupted me. There's so much data coming at us. And think of it as bandwidth on a computer, that there is only so much data that can come into the computer, for example. Like when you're watching maybe Netflix or you're calling up something on the computer, you know, the little dial, it goes woo, 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 right? And it's buffering in. And you know that if you start up email and you try to watch a YouTube video or get into your bank account, that dial is going to get stuck in a loop because it's got too much stuff coming down the bandwidth and it's taking some time. It needs to process. So better to just like go get a cup of coffee, or maybe it's time to like go take a shower or something. And when you come back, the data will have come in and been processed and you can continue. So this is freeze in the body. There are lots of times in our life where we just have too much information coming down the bandwidth. And so the dorsal vagal system is kind of like that buffer on the computer that allows the body the space and time to be able to integrate and process data coming in. So like the computer, you can imagine if we try to do too many things, like I'm already kind of on overload coming home maybe from a shift, And now my kids need me, and my wife is upset about something and wants tending and befriending. And oh my gosh, the washing machine is just broken. That it's too much data often coming in, and the body hasn't been able to process the data, the intensity of things. And so what does somebody look like when they're in more of a freezy state? They systems have gone offline. So the capacity to feel is very dulled. And so somebody in freeze isn't really going to feel things or know how they feel. They're not going to be able to think very clearly because a lot of the blood is drained from the frontal cortex. And so, if you say to somebody who's really deep in freeze, what do you want to do this weekend? Or where do you want to go eat dinner tonight? I don't know. I don't care. Whatever. People's faces are going to look rather flat because in the dorsal system, it hijacks cranial nerves that innervate facial muscles. So when you look at somebody, if you feel like they have almost like a deadened face, like there isn't movement much on their face, that's probably somebody who's in freeze. So when we talk about trauma or somebody who is having symptoms, they're depressed, they're suicidal, they're having pops of anxiety or panic, they're totally irritable all the time. What we're talking about is this nervous system getting more stuck in either that sympathetic revved up state where I'm hypervigilant and always looking for danger, or I've gone kind of freezy and like the buffer, I don't really fully come out of it. Or I can't shift states. I can't go into freeze because something overwhelming is happening. But now that I'm safe and there's loving people around me and I'm in a different environment, my system can come back up to ventral so I can be available to be relational, and I can be available to take in the beauty, not just the danger cues, but wow, that sunrise is so beautiful this morning, and now I'm hearing a plane, but that's not a danger cue to me. I can just kind of enjoy it. But when the body gets stuck in sympathetic or dorsal states, then we're going to show up with symptoms. And so treatment is about resynchronizing biology and assisting biology to be able to have a flexibility, to be able to go up and down the ladder of where these states are, ventral being at the top, then you sympathetic, and then dorsal. And so resilience is about being able to travel between states and not get stuck in one. So that is, I'll call it part one of introduction to good mental health treatment and an orientation to a paradigm of whatever we're doing with people in the room. It hangs on this frame, and interventions then are not about talking about the problem. The goal is not reliving of bad stuff or just talking about bad stuff. It is about getting biology to be able to have this greater fluidity. So that is my first little mini lesson with you guys, and happy to continue and say more about that at a different time. Bye.